LGBTQ plus support. My name is Jacob. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm thrilled to be back this week talking about more LGBT history for LGBTQ plus History Month. The first thing I wanted to share with you guys is the video we left off with last week, because last week we talked about history leading up to the Stonewall riots. Today we're going to talk about Stonewall and a couple other exciting things that are coming up. But first we're going to focus on Stonewall. So the first video I want to share with you guys is a music video. It's like a Schoolhouse Rock style video put out by the drag queen Varla Jean Merman. And it's Schoolhouse Rock vibes, but telling the story of Stonewall. So here's that, and enjoy.
Review your history with Varla Jean. Lesbians and gays have been on Earth since time began, in history, in art, and all across our land. Though there's been hate in many a state, we still have left a mark. And unbelievably, in 1953, our president declared, "No gays will work for me." So we moved into the shadows and love in the dark. Then in New York, in 69, being gay was okay, but touching was a crime, and the cops tried to stop what gays would play at night, like the legendary Stonewall. See, when a bust was planned, the owner got a call. He'd evade the raid with a quick flick of a warning light. There's no dancing when the light's on, romancing when the light's on, boys dressed as boys, girls as girls when the light's on, or they'll read you your rights when the lights on. Later that same year, by night in June, another raid was planned on the Salacious Saloon, but the light would never flash. This time no one was tipped off. Queens mobbed the scene, but the mood wasn't gay, for Judy Garland's funeral had been held that very day, and these grieving gals were pretty pissed off. So when the raid was paid, did a drag king throw his brew, or did a moody Judy do her duty? Well, no matter which was true, it became the hairpin drop heard around the world. Yes, they'd had enough at Stonewall. The crowd took to the street, more and more joined the brawl. They unite in these fights for 3 nights. The butchers can be curled. We want to dance with the lights on, romance with the lights on. Boys can be with boys and girls with girls when the lights on. We demand equal rights. Now the fights, now the fights, now the fights on. Now baby, you don't dig a wig or jive in a dive at night. But it was they who paved the way for all who say they're lesbian or gay. Now we're out in the open. That's right. And out in the light. Every day is Gay Friday. Now we're dancing with the lights on, romancing with the lights on. Boys can be with boys and girls with girls when the lights on. Now we must keep the fight, keep the fight, keep the fight, keep the fight on. 'Cause we the people means us.
Amazing. I hope you enjoyed that. It's just silly. It's fun. The next video I want to share with you guys, we were watching a series of videos last week from a YouTuber called Are They Gay? I'm going to put their YouTube right here again. And I wanted to continue with his series. And so this is his video about Stonewall. It just is a really great intro and kind of the context of what was going on during the Stonewall riots of that time. So here you go. Here is that video about Stonewall.
Greenwich Village saw a surge in population in the 1960s, as rebellious writers, political students, and LGBT folk came to stay. With the rising queer population, the Mafia saw a window of opportunity. Stonewall Inn opened in 1966, selling watered-down drinks and bribes to local police. The homeless and impoverished queer youth of Christopher Street found a home. Raids were frequent at Stonewall, but usually things ended easily. Bribes were given, and everything went back to normal. But this night was somehow different. The police would usually round up the patrons, taking those who were feminine presenting and asking for their IDs. But the patrons refused. As resistant patrons were rounded up into police vehicles, one lesbian drag king physically resisted the police. Her name was Stormy DeLarvery. Shouting, "Somebody do something!" A crowd of 100 people were gathered outside, and tension rose in the air. Suddenly, violence broke out. The queens, gay men, lesbians, and trans patrons began a violent backlash against the police. Notable trans women and drag queens like Marsha P. Johnson stood at the front lines, escalating the uprising. Although many say Johnson began the riots, she states herself that she actually came around 2 a.m., after the fire had already broken out. Despite this, the riots were a collaborative and spontaneous effort that were transformed by the activism of organizations. Marsha P. Johnson is an almost legendary figure to be revered, and her contributions to the riot are one of her many accomplishments. As the night continued, kick lines formed, singing "We Are the Stonewall Girls." Craig Rodwell, a longtime activist and owner of the Oscar Wilde Memorial Bookshop, saw the riots from his window and wanted to make sure this riot was not lost among the numerous other LGBT+ riots. He called local papers, making sure the event was gaining coverage. This ensured that the second night would bring more attendance. Papers like the New York Post and the New York Times covered the riots. The walls of Stonewall were covered in written words like "gay power." Hundreds of bystanders turned into thousands, with other radical groups showing their solidarity, such as the Black Panthers and Students for a Democratic Society. Craig Rodwell and his partner Fred Sargent began to pass out thousands of leaflets to show that LGBT+ activism was not a one-time event. Marsha P. Johnson climbed onto a lamppost and smashed a police car with her handbag. To some, like Johnson and Rodwell, this display of fierce passion was a good thing for the community. But longtime activist groups like the Mattachine Society saw it as a step back. Mattachine was not necessarily a group that advocated for queer people to go into hiding, but instead that queer people should be assimilated. They saw Stonewall as the opposite of that. Mattachine's message was in contrast to the new generation of queer activists. While Mattachine members were mostly white gay men, many younger activists were people of color, impoverished, and trans. The new activists didn't really have experience with assimilation, and had nothing to lose. They demanded liberation from the norm, not assimilation into it. Randy Wicker once stated, "Screaming queens forming chorus lines and kicking went against everything that I wanted people to think about homosexuals, that we were a bunch of drag queens in the village, acting disorderly and tacky and cheap." The Gay Liberation Front was an immediate response to Stonewall. Although one riot was enough to bring attention, many activists saw the need for further organization. The front was staunchly anti-racist, anti-capitalist, and anti-traditional gender roles. As a part of the drag queen caucus of the Gay Liberation Front, Marsha P. Johnson and her friend, Sylvia Rivera, a Latina trans woman, started the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, or STAR. They fought for the street queens and marginalized members of the community, those whose identities and expression were not able to be hidden. Although Rivera was a street queen herself, she did everything in her power to provide a place of acceptance for those like her. The Gay Liberation Front wanted to focus on a broader array of issues than just gay rights. Meetings were disorganized, and the work was sometimes unclear. Thus, some disillusioned members formed the Gay Activist Alliance, which focused specifically on the LGBT community and took a more confrontational approach to its activism. The annual Reminders in Philadelphia were yearly demonstrations on gay rights that had been going on since 1965. Craig Rodwell, a frequent demonstrator, proposed that the Reminders should be moved to New York, and that they should rename it Christopher Street Liberation Day. Thus, a march to commemorate Stonewall began on June 28, 1970. The tradition of pride parades began to remember the night of spontaneity that turned into a movement. Stonewall is not important because of the fires, the bricks, or the shot glasses. It was important because it made queer people believe that they could have a voice. It wasn't the work of one man, woman, or person. It was a collaboration of many voices. The Mattachine Society had its time as an important part of queer history, But new activists were needed for new generations. Stonewall was the catalyst for these new activists. It really isn't as simple as who threw the first brick or who was there. The important part of it was what the community did after. In the next episode of By the Decades, we explore the impact of Stonewall in the age of gay liberation.
Amazing. Well, I also wanted to share this video with you that is about Marsha P. Johnson. While, of course, Marsha herself has said that she didn't throw the first brick at Stonewall, and it is good still to commemorate, what she has done for LGBTQ plus, history and, the legacy of Marsha. And so Laverne Cox actually released this video speaking about, her legacy and what she's done. So I wanted to share that with you.
When I think about Sylvia and Marsha, I think what I owe to them is this history of struggle, this history of fighting and being pushed aside and fighting some more and never giving up on the fight. And I think it's so important for us to remember them and to remember the truth of their lives and the truth of their struggle so that we don't repeat this disregard for certain people and certain populations. It took some street queens and hustlers to fight back against the police on that fateful day in 1969. And that moment was a catalyst for a movement that has brought us years later marriage equality, and hopefully will bring us equal protections for trans people on a federal level. When we think about the truth of their lives and how they struggled and how they lived, I think it should be a lesson. And their example was to love and give no matter what. Star's legacy is that.
Amazing. The last video I think I'm going to share with you about Stonewall that was put out by the New York Times, and they kind of took a deep dive into the myth versus the true story of Stonewall, and it's very, very interesting, and I think it was cleverly produced. And so this is the true story of Stonewall put out by the New York Times.
Who threw the first brick at Stonewall?
Some say it was Stormy DeLavier.
Marsha P. Johnson.
Sylvia Rivera.
It's a question that calls attention to overlooked LGBT elders, but also...
Jason Mraz threw the first brick at Stonewall.
Judy Garland threw the first brick.
Scarlett Johansson. It's become an inside joke about queer icons and straight allyship. 50 years after the police raided the Stonewall Inn and its patrons mounted a resistance on the street outside, I still didn't know the answer to this question. Who threw the first brick at Stonewall? What I did know is that I had heard this story over and over again. The gay rights movement was born in 1969 at a beloved gay bar called the Stonewall Inn. The Stonewall riot began when a drag queen, bereft by the death of Judy Garland, threw a brick at a police officer. The riot culminated in a Rockette-style kick line of drag queens facing down tactical police in riot gear. It's a beautiful story, but it's not exactly true. So, I gathered some people who were at Stonewall in 1969, some historians who had spent years studying LGBT history, and some contemporary queer writers to ask them, what's wrong with this account of Stonewall? They helped me break it down bit by bit.
It didn't begin at Stonewall.
Before Stonewall, we had the Daughters of Bilitis, we had the Mattachine Society.
There was the Sip-In at Julius's.
And the movement in the world dates back to 1897 in Berlin, with the founding of Magnus Hirschfeld's organization, which was the first gay rights group.
So if gay rights didn't begin at Stonewall, why was Stonewall important?
Because it led to the creation of the gay liberation movement.
Gay Liberation Front was born out of the ashes of Stonewall. Gay Liberation Front is literally why we have everything we have today.
They planned a march on the first anniversary of Stonewall.
And people forget that there were 3 pride parades. I was at the one in Los Angeles in 1970. We had a big jar of Vaseline on a float. It was a really in-your-face float.
Oh, wow. Now here's a fundamental question about Stonewall. Was it a riot?
And what we did is we were cheering and dancing in the street. That's not a riot.
It was just a loud and bawdy, fun group of guys until it turned into a riot.
It is called a riot, an uprising, a rebellion.
I like the word rebellion, not overthrow the government rebellion, rebellion from within.
Next, was the Stonewall Bar as idyllic as some media portrays it to have been?
The Stonewall Inn was a safe haven for the queer community.
But it was a dump.
It was a hellhole.
Dirty, rundown, mafia run.
A mafia sleazy bar, and they watered down drinks.
Watered down drinks.
There was a much better bar called the Cherry Lane.
The 10th of always.
Cookies.
So the Stonewall Inn was neither New York's only gay bar, nor an especially beloved institution. Now, let's talk about that drag queen who started it all.
They said that she threw the first shot glass at Stonewall, and it was the shot glass heard around the world.
One of the persistent myths about Stonewall is that Marcia threw the first cocktail glass. Marcia herself said in an interview that I did with Marcia, I didn't get there until 2.
I was uptown. I didn't get downtown until about 2 o'clock, because when I got downtown, the place was already on fire and it was a raid already.
Marsha P. Johnson's friend and fellow activist Sylvia Rivera is also sometimes credited with starting Stonewall.
Sylvia Rivera is known for throwing the first bottle at the Stonewall riots.
Sylvia Rivera herself said in 2001,
I have been given the credit for throwing the first Molotov cocktail, but I always like to correct it. I threw the second one. I did not throw the first one.
First of all, that comment was probably tongue-in-cheek. Second of all, it's not certain that Molotov cocktails were thrown at all. Regardless of what Rivera and Johnson did at Stonewall, their impact on the trans and gay movements can't be overstated.
When I see people saying Marsha and Sylvia were the ones who threw the first bricks, I want to remember them in a way that feels honest, because their legacies extend far beyond that night.
However, there was a gender nonconforming person that several witnesses credit with catalyzing Stonewall.
She was very butch and she was tough, and the police were being rough with her, and she was really fighting back.
We have 4 independent accounts who said that this woman's fight with the police is what tipped the scales and set it all off.
She called out to the crowd, "What are you doing? Why are you just standing there? Why don't you do something?"
Some people say that woman was Stormy DeLarvier, a lesbian who worked as a bouncer at the time. DeLarvier sometimes took credit and sometimes denied her role, but so far there's been no conclusive proof of who exactly that butch woman at Stonewall was. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
Judy Garland.
Judy Garland's funeral took place at Campbell's Funeral Home on the afternoon before the events at Stonewall.
The patrons of the Stonewall used their grief over Judy's death to rise up and fight back.
But were the two events related?
The worst question that people ask about Stonewall is whether it was caused by the death of Judy Garland.
If one looks at the accounts published in 1969, there's only one account that mentions Stonewall and Judy Garland, and that was written by a right-wing columnist to mock the movement.
You're trivializing our anger and oppression of 2,000 years to a singer.
So I went to Judy Garland's funeral, and a lot of Stonewall Queens did.
Oh, it was like Noah's Ark. All of Judy's fans. God bless Judy Garland. But no, she was not the cause of the Stonewall riot. No.
So now, let's talk about that brick. One of the most derided representations of the first brick came from the 2015 movie Stonewall.
Gay power!
All anyone wants to talk about is who threw the first brick.
Who threw the first brick?
People claiming I threw the first brick.
First off, it asks were bricks thrown.
Where were those bricks found?
Apparently there was a construction site that had a pile of bricks.
I heard that last week.
Did they show you a picture of that construction site?
It's possible they were pulling rocks from the street. I haven't determined where that would have been unless it was in the park. If there's a tree pit, they're usually lined with something.
Around this tree, there were these stones. I pulled up the stones. I know I threw stones. I don't know if I threw a brick. I doubt it. I think I was a stones man.
So objects were thrown that may or may not have been bricks. But amidst all this chaos in the streets, did they really form a kick line while facing down police in riot gear?
No, there was not a kick line at Stonewall. There were many kick lines at Stonewall.
And I'll be glad to give you the lyrics. We are the Stonewall girls.
We wear our hair in curls.
We don't wear underwear.
To show our pubic hair.
It was done to the tune of the Howdy Doody theme.
It's Howdy Doody time. You're right, it is.
All right, so we've worked out a framework for what happened at Stonewall that many people can maybe mostly agree on. But why does this even matter? Why are we nitpicking this to death? Because when we talk about what happened at Stonewall 50 years ago, we're also talking about issues the LGBT community is still wrestling with today, namely transphobia and racism.
There's one graphic I'm thinking about in particular, trans women of color throwing bricks at cops gave me the right to get married. I think a lot of people cling on to these narratives because trans women of color are often already sidelined.
I mean, there were some individual people of color, but it was not a group of trans people of color who started the writing. If people start telling stories not as they were, but as they would like them to be, that procedure can be used by anybody for any purpose. So I think that we need to be consistent in the truth.
If we are demanding that our history be respected, then we have to respect it ourselves. You have to apply the same criteria to our history, that it be worthwhile, that it be accurate, that it be well researched. We should recognize our warts as well as our flowers, as it were.
I mean, I think historical erasure is real. How do we tell a history of something when our lives aren't in archives? Speculative fiction and historically informed fiction, to me, are ways to answer that question. And it doesn't have to be true to be meaningful.
Stonewall was a messy evening. LGBT histories are very messy. I think naming that doesn't take away from the importance of what happened.
I don't think anyone threw the first brick at Stonewall.
And at this point, I don't care who threw the first brick.
Oh, I don't think it matters.
And it doesn't matter.
Like, it doesn't matter. It's okay that we don't know.
If it wasn't a brick, it was a rock. If it wasn't a rock, it was a purse. If it wasn't a purse, it was a shoe. If it wasn't a shoe, it was a glass. If it wasn't a glass, it was a dirty look. It was all of those things. It wasn't just that day, it was days before, and it was many years after.
It's 50 years later, and we still can't agree on exactly what happened that night. But that's all right. Stonewall was about people reclaiming their own narratives from those that told them they were sick or pitiful or didn't even exist. Part of telling your own story means living openly and partying at parades, but it also means contending with other people's versions of that story, even if theirs doesn't match perfectly with yours. As Chrysanthemum Tran said, that can be messy, and that's okay. I love a messy party. Hey, this is Shane. I produced this video. We've spent a month covering Pride, so check out all of our coverage, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Amazing. I hope you found that interesting. I hope you learned a little bit of something about the Stonewall riots, or maybe learned some new things if you already knew quite a bit about it. The next thing I want to move on to, so this weekend marks the 22nd anniversary of the Matthew Shepard hate crime. So I don't want to go too deep into that because this is a support group. We're here to spread joy, but I did want to commemorate Matthew Shepard because that is this weekend, and some people don't know the story. So this is a video that kind of summarizes the legacy of Matthew Shepard and kind of celebrates where we've come and what's happened ever since Matthew Shepard was murdered. It does briefly discuss kind of the trial and what happened, but it does not go into depth about it. It mostly kind of just celebrates where we've come. So it's the only video we're going to watch about this, but I did think it was an important part of LGBT history. And since it was this weekend, I did want to touch on it. This was back in 1998. So this is a video about Matthew Shepard.
It was 20 years ago this weekend that a 21-year-old Wyoming college student named Matthew Shepard was lured from a bar, robbed, and beaten in an attack that would take his life. Shepard's death sparked vigils around the world and 2 decades now of activism in his name. Matthew's parents turned their grief into action as they work to protect people like their son. NBC's Stephanie Gosk has our Sunday Spotlight.
A performer takes his place on stage.
My son Matthew did not look like a winner.
But the lines he's delivering are his words, and the story he's telling is his own.
On October 12, 1998, my firstborn son and hero died.
I'm Matthew Shepard. The Laramie Project, a landmark play, explores the events surrounding the murder of University of Wyoming student Matthew Shepard.
Go home, give your kids a hug.
And for the first time, Matt's father, Dennis Shepard, is reading his part. It's been 20 years since the tragedy rocked the country and began to reshape the way we think about hate crime.
It's hard when you say it out loud that it's been 20 years, that we've been without Matt almost as long as we had Matt. That's really heartbreaking for me.
On the night of October 6, 1998, 2 men targeted and abducted Matt, driving him to a remote area east of Laramie, Wyoming. Jason Marsden leads the foundation that bears his friend's name.
They reached a dead end toward the end of this road and took Matt out of the truck, tied him to a buck fence that's just out here past this hillside behind me, and hit him in the head 19 to 21 times with the butt end of a .357 pistol.
Matt was tortured and left to die, found by a bicyclist after 18 hours. He never regained consciousness and died 5 days later.
At 12:53 a.m. this morning, Matthew Shepard died.
The tragedy would become one of the most notorious anti-gay hate crimes in American history.
You need some preaching, my friend.
Matt's funeral and the murder trials, which led to multiple life sentences, dominated the media.
Everybody, male and female, could look at Matt and see something that was similar to what their experiences were.
The correspondence we got was easily half from the straight community. I didn't know this was happening. I had no idea. It was ignorance. Mainstream media had not at all covered the gay community outside of the AIDS pandemic and the pride parades once a year.
The Shepards' lives were altered forever. They would go on to lead an activist movement that, more than a decade later, would result in passage of the Hate Crimes Prevention Act, a federal law against biased crimes directed at LGBT people.
You know, I just saw this very bright, intellectual, worldly young person. It's one of the mysteries that keeps you going. I can't ever really know what he might have been able to accomplish, but I have a pretty good idea of what we can accomplish in his name if we keep doing it. And so we do.
Work that remains urgent today. Hate crimes reported to police in America's 10 largest cities rose an average of 12.5% in 2017.
We in no way anticipated that we would make this giant U-turn. I just feel like we're having to start all over.
Despite the challenges ahead, the memory of Matt lives on.
Good is coming out of evil. People have said enough is enough. I miss my son, but I'm proud to say he is my son.
For Sunday Today, Stephanie Gosk.
Amazing. I don't want to harp too much on that because obviously it's very sad. I want to spread joy. But I just figured it was good to commemorate that anniversary because it was this weekend. So now the last thing I want to kind of talk about in this last section of time, this weekend is also National Coming Out Day. And so I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit about why we celebrate this day, the history of it, its origins, and all of that fun stuff. So National Coming Out Day started in 1988, and it is observed annually to celebrate coming out, to raise awareness for the LGBT community and the civil rights movement. This day has always been marked by, people coming out, or people speaking out about coming out or about their coming out experiences. National Coming Out Day is celebrated in Ireland, Switzerland, Netherlands, United Kingdom, and the U.S. Every year in the U.S., the Human Rights Campaign sponsors events for National Coming Out Day to raise awareness for LGBT individuals, couples, parents, children, allies. And actually, for many years, it used to have themes. And a couple of the themes for National Coming Out Day have been Come Out to Congress, and Out Odyssey being Out Rocks, Talk About It, Conversations from the Heart, Coming Out for Equality, Come Out, Vote, and Coming Out Still Matters. And so I wanted to share a couple of videos with you that have been produced about coming out, about National Coming Out Day. And the first one that I want to share with you is the do's and don'ts of when your child comes out. And this was produced by Mama Bears on YouTube, and I will put their YouTube link down right here. And it is just a good resource for what to do if your child, or, it's also good to use these if anyone really comes out to you. So please enjoy this video put out by the Mama Bears.
Hi, I'm Sarah Cunningham, founder of Free Mom Hugs.
And I'm Liz Dyer, founder of the Mama Bears. In honor of National Coming Out Day, Sarah and I wanted to offer some do's and don'ts for when your child comes out to you. When your child comes out to you, don't express doubt or say it's probably just a phase. Instead, show interest, ask some open-ended questions, and encourage your child to keep sharing with you. Remember, even if they identify differently in the future, that does not negate nor diminish the way they identify in the present moment. One thing I like to hear parents say is this: I really appreciate that you are taking the time to know yourself and striving to be authentic.
Don't ask your children to stay in the closet. I understand that it may take some time to get used to this new reality, and I understand that you may be concerned about how other people will react when your children come out. But asking our children to check themselves at the door or stay in the closet is harmful to their well-being, and we shouldn't ask our children to hide who they are to make others feel comfortable. This is a burden that's too heavy for our children, and we shouldn't ask them to carry that.
When your child comes out to you, let them know that you wholeheartedly support them and ask them what they need. Let them know that you want to do whatever you can to help them keep speaking and living their truth. Ask them what they think would be most helpful, and then offer to help them find ways to make that possible. It means so much to our kids to know that we are joining them from a place of support on their journey to becoming their most authentic and best version of themselves.
Tell them that you love them unconditionally and thank them for trusting you with this information. Your children are coming to you so tenderly and trusting you with this very personal and important information. Go overboard. Celebrate them, even if you might feel a little nervous inside about doing that. Your children need to hear that you love them and you're going to figure this out together.
Don't use religion to shame your child when they come out to you. If your family is religious, chances are your child who is coming out to you is carrying around some shame. And you want to reassure them they have nothing to be ashamed of. Shame is the #1 reason that LGBTQ youth experience depression, anxiety, self-loathing, and suicidal ideation. With just a little bit of research, religious families are finding that non-affirming theology is based on a misinterpretation of an ancient language.
Do find support and resources for yourself. Oftentimes, parents and families feel afraid and alone. Well, I have great news. There's wonderful organizations out there to offer a wellspring of support and resources to you and your family. Two great organizations are Free Mom Hugs and the Real Mama Bears. You can find more information at realmamabears.org and freemomhugs.org. Let's celebrate our families together.
Amazing. I hope that was insightful and helpful. The next video I want to share with you is actually from the Oprah show. This is from an episode that actually aired the very first year that we celebrate National Coming Out Day. And so she did a discussion about coming out on her show. This was obviously from 1988, so it is a little bit dated. It's a little old, but I think it's interesting to see how it was celebrated in the first year and also how far we've come in the years since. So this is the Oprah show celebrating National Coming Out Day in 1988.
You wanted to say what? Yes.
Hi, Oprah. My name is Michael Shaw, and I want to tell my family, who already knows, that I am gay. They rejected me when they found that out. they're finally beginning to come back to me little by little. I'm very proud of my father. He's not real thrilled that he has a gay son, but he's beginning to make the adjustment and to start talking to me about that. My future employers don't know yet, but they do now.
Okay. I would think, isn't it harder on fathers for their sons for some reason?
Well, one would think that, but it's not necessarily. I want to pick up on something he said, because whenever we tell somebody, we put them in the same kind of process that we went through. So when we tell someone that we're gay, and I am gay, I'm not just a psychologist, when we tell someone that we're gay, we put them into that personal part of dealing with this disclosure, or dealing with having a gay child, or dealing with having a gay friend. So they go through their own process. What I've observed over and over is that most of our family members go through that process faster than we did. We expect people to jump for joy when we tell them, but not one person in this room, I suspect, when they discovered their sexuality or discovered they were homosexual, jumped for joy to celebrate it. Most of us went through a lot of soul searching, and I really feel that with the coming out day happening, we can expect this country to go through some real self-examination.
And although a lot of people have gotten to the point where they can finally say to the world on this show, as you mentioned earlier, it really is a process. You first have to, I would think it's more important to admit it to yourself and stop those conflicts within yourself.
And to love yourself.
Yeah.
To develop self-esteem and to be gay.
Okay. Yes. You wanted to, did you finish?
Well, I would agree with the doctor on that score, except that I've known since I was 7. So for me, it was just what I've been all my life. It wasn't ever really a discovery. My parents, my mother is not watching the show today because she refuses to see this, even though she knows she doesn't want to deal with having it in her face. And I can understand that. She is coming to her own process, as my whole family is now.
Yeah, I want to talk about that, because isn't this just throwing it up in people's faces? Isn't it, to a great extent, better if you want to be gay, just keep it to yourself and do what you do, and it's nobody else's business?
Exactly.
No.
That makes me want to puke.
That's what makes you. That's what everybody says. That's the favorite line.
I mean, for his parents and for a lot of people watching who are saying, so you're gay, it's none of my business.
This is the biggest problem we have, and this is where I would really like to say to the heterosexual people out there, when you say it's nobody's business but your own, and keep this in the privacy of your own bedroom, and then there'll be no problems, this is not where it's at. It's not a sexual issue. This involves our whole being, our whole lifestyle. Picture yourself if you had to hide who your husband was, or who your wife was, or who the person that you're dating over the weekend, or had to change pronouns when you talked about what you did. What a terrible, constricting
and go through life afraid you're going to slip. Yeah.
Yes, and the lies and the energy again that takes. So I guess I just want to ask the heterosexuals out there to put yourselves in our shoes for a moment. And just try to imagine that for a second, and I think you'll get a feeling of why it's so important for us to come out.
See, I didn't want to make you want to puke, but I think for most people, particularly people like Greg's mother, it is simply a sexual issue. They think it's only who you're sleeping with.
Yes, but that's because most people don't think they know anyone gay, because we've been in hiding. And what they'll discover when they find out that they know someone gay and love someone gay, their brother, their sister, their co-workers, their aunts, uncles, what they'll discover is that we are people, and that our sexuality is only a part of us. And what we get to discover as we work through this process is how to integrate our lives more fully. And that's vitally important.
Hi, YouTubers. I'm excited to give you an update about our own YouTube channel. Now you can find new videos every day. They're the kind of videos that will make you look at life differently. They may even make you laugh a little bit. Who doesn't need a daily dose of that? So here's just a taste of some of what you'll see. Subscribe to the OWN channel today, and we'll see you on YouTube.
Amazing. So the next video I want to share with you was actually put out by Now This. And it was put out about 2 years ago in 2018 on National Coming Out Day. And it's discussions of why we come out and why we celebrate this day why it's still so important, and kind of how the day has changed over the past, 30 plus years. So I hope you enjoy that video put out by Now This.
I thought people were going to hate me because I'm gay. It kind of limited me to take risks or go for opportunities.
I came out when I was 14, and it's still hard to talk about just because
of pressure in society and even in the gay community.
Even if you are raised and you're taught that differences are good, at the end of the day, you're still isolated, and you're still alone, and you're still finding your way, understanding what you are and who you are, where you identify.
National Coming Out Day is important not for me, but for our greater community. That's what we need to focus on during this day.
People from all different walks of life are in different stages of their coming out, and it's not something that just happens.
There's a reason to come out, right? People think of heterosexuality as the norm. You have to declare that you don't belong to that group that everyone assumes you belong to.
It's not like you can wear it on your sleeve and be like, I'm coming out, I'm out now.
I was very angry with myself. I think that was just like all the pent-up emotion of the love that I felt, the anger that I felt, the sadness that I felt, and the appreciation that I felt from people that I already knew. And I think all that just mixed up, and anger was the main emotion. And I was like, this has to come out. This is not healthy.
If I could go back and talk to myself back then, that would be the thing I would say. You are a part of a community that is so amazing. We have our faults, of course, but be a part of it.
The stakes for coming out couldn't be higher for some people. If someone comes out to you, don't say, I knew it all along, or I saw signs of this. If someone comes out to you, why don't you say, hey, can I take you out for ice cream? Do you want to go to the Cheesecake Factory?
Now that I've come out emotionally, I can put a lot of energy behind a lot of the different groups I belong to, one of which is being, queer. I think that not only helps me find a community, but it also makes me just happier about myself and who I am and where I'm going.
Now that we have sort of this recognized day to allow people the chance that they might not have had before, but I do think it's also important that we're pushing those boundaries to make it acceptable to come out whenever you're comfortable doing that.
For me, when I realized that coming out is a lifetime of coming out, I think it's just important to realize that this is a process and your safety is the most important part.
I think it's important to celebrate it, also to one day not celebrate it anymore, when you don't have to come out of the closet. You don't have to declare that you're different from what society says is the normal.
One way you can support the LGBT community is there's this important election, so make sure that you get out to the polls this November, support LGBT equality if it's on the ballot, that you support politicians who are advocating for love and kindness.
It is all right to stay in the closet. It is all right if you are not feeling safe, if you don't feel comfortable. It is completely okay to stay in the closet. It doesn't make you any less queer, doesn't make you any less trans. You are still your identity no matter who knows.
There is no right or wrong way to come out. There is no perfect time to come out.
Coming out is really for you. Coming out is your process, and you are inviting other people into that process when you come out. So just remember that this is for you.
I also wanted to share this video. It's really short, but I think it, really kind of breaks down the origins of National Coming Out Day, the history of it, the year before it started, what kind of caused the inspiration behind creating National Coming Out Day. So I wanted to share this with you. It's only about a minute or two about the history of National Coming Out Day.
Well, today is not just October 11th, it is also National Coming Out Day, which is a very historic day for the LGBTQ community, and it's been that way for the last 31 years. So today we are going beyond the headline to see how this day of celebration started.
It all started on October 11th, 1987. When 500,000 people proudly marched on Washington for gay rights. It was the second demonstration in our nation's capital and resulted in founding many LGBTQ organizations. And the momentum continued 4 months after the march, when more than 100 lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer activists gathered in Warrenton, Virginia. Recognizing that the LGBTQ community often reacted defensively to anti-LGBTQ actions, they came up with the idea for a national day to celebrate coming out and chose the anniversary of that second march on Washington to mark it. And you can thank psychologist Richard Eckert and gay rights activist Gene O'Leary for founding the day. Today recognizes LGBTQ+ individuals and their supporters. It's often used as a day for people to come out to loved ones. So what does this day mean to you?
The last thing I want to leave you with this week is just a series of some coming out videos. Some of them are really lovely, some of them are heartwarming, some of them might be a little sad, but I think for National Coming Out Day, I wanted to celebrate some coming out stories. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste a couple videos in here. At the beginning of each video, I will let you know which YouTube channel the video is from. Yeah, here's just some coming out stories that I think are lovely.
Just praying to God, like, please just protect me and like be by my side and like help me get through this.
And the message said, I know you're gay and I know the guy that you've been dealing with has HIV. Please go get tested.
I had just been hiding it for so long just because I thought it was something that I would be able to change.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I think the goal of coming out theoretically is always to be your most authentic self and whatever that happens to mean for you at the time. I've come out initially as someone who was exclusively attracted to men. Then I came out as a trans person, and then later when I became stealth, which is basically living in a way where the people around you do not know that you're transgender, I had to then later come out as a trans person again in a different way.
When I came out, my entire family was very supportive and it was great. It was very shocking, which I know is like not always the norm and totally not what I was expecting.
So I technically did not come out. I was actually forced out. I was in dance practice one day and I happened to come out of practice to text messages from my mother, and I opened the text message and the message said, I know you're gay and I know the guy that you've been dealing with has HIV. Please go get tested.
So the first time I came out, I wrote my mom a
letter to my mother, and she read it and her reaction was, oh, I raised you, I know.
The letter was basically telling my mom that I was attracted to men. And when I came out to her, she was like, there's something more to this. And I thought it was like her trying to tell me that I wasn't attracted to men, but in time I recognized that she had sensed something about my gender and that I hadn't really yet had that full conversation with myself. And so a lot of me coming out has kind of consistently been me taking the burden off of my shoulders and being like, I don't want to have to keep up another story. Let me just tell you what's what and just kind of let that be what it is. I would tell people who are not yet out, don't feel like you got to jump in right away. Get to a place where you can support yourself and be safe. And don't just come out because someone did a great video on social media saying that it was amazing. You got to be smart about this. The opinion that should matter most to you is your opinion about yourself.
It eventually turned out that I didn't have to hide who I was, and there was no reason that I ever had to.
And it helped me love myself more, ultimately, because I'm no longer afraid of what would happen or could happen if people knew the truth. But just be you and live your life.
And it proved to me like, okay, I'm telling you this, I'm giving myself to you and you're listening to me, you're having my back and you're listening to me and you accept me for who I am as a person, and that means the world to me.
My name is TJ McCrae, Director of Instructional Technology and Media Services, and my pronouns are he, him, his.
My pronouns are they, them, their, she, her, hers.
They, them, and me.
I consider myself a queer bisexual.
Cisgendered lesbian. I am gender, non-binary, and queer. Gay.
An African American gay male.
I identify as queer.
Chicana feminist. I am queer, cisgendered.
A queer gay man.
A cisgendered queer woman. Generally bisexual, but I have chosen to share my life with a woman who is my wife.
I really think I knew I was gay when I was a little kid in elementary school. I didn't have the words for it. I didn't see gay people around. I didn't know what it was. But if I knew about it, I would have come out then.
I came out when I was 17 years old. I was a junior at Memorial High School.
I came out for the first time when I was 20 years old, and I have continuously had to come out ever since.
I came out to my family, friends, and coworkers 3 months ago.
I am just currently coming out. I knew I was queer in middle school, but didn't have support or conditions to explore that until college.
I've never had sometimes what we fear or what we see as traditional coming out stories where individuals sitting down, talking to their parents and all that other type of thing. For me, it's just been one of those things where most people kind of made an assumption, and then I just really came out to myself and started living my true identity.
I came out at 19 years old. I was a freshman in college.
I mostly came out to myself first, but I understood sexuality as such a binary thing that I knew that there was gay and I knew there was straight, but I didn't know that there was anything in between.
So I knew I was gay from a really young age, but I didn't know other gay people, and I didn't know that being gay was something I could actually do and be happy and have the life that I wanted.
When I came out to myself, when I came to that realization, I felt like I had discovered a superpower that I didn't know I had.
It felt so much better. It felt like a huge burden lifted after I told someone about it. And then I was able to be authentically me after that point.
La razón que me tomó tanto tiempo en decirle a mi mamá era porque yo de verdad pensaba lo peor. Pensaba que me iba a rechazar. Encontré amor.
I came out as an adult who was in a hetero relationship with my high school sweetheart. And it was not easy to be who I am and to come out to others, but I can say that it was the best decision I've ever made to live more authentically who I am.
I was scared to finally admit that I was gay, but then after everyone came around, it was the best thing I ever did because I have someone in my life that loves me.
It's nothing that I've ever hid from students or from staff because I feel like my life is normal.
I'm really happy with who I am.
You have the right to exist out loud. You have the right to exist in color. You have the right to be complex and interesting and vibrant and alive. And I hope you don't ever forget that or let anybody take that away from you.
Please know that we love and support you. And I know that because I had the wonderful love and support of this community.
I want you all to know that whatever you think you are or whatever you think about your identity, you're right. And you are loved and you are brave and you are beautiful.
I want you to know that there is a big rainbow community out there that's going to love and support you. And it's a lot of fun.
Never be afraid to be who you are. When you learn to live your true, authentic self and be who you are, you will be a much happier person.
We're here for you, we love you, and we support you.
And I hope that everybody has that room and that space to explore who they want to love, because I don't see that as anything but beautiful.
So I know it can feel really scary and it can feel really lonely, especially if you are at a school or a place where, you know, you might think you're the only person who's queer or LGBTQ. But I think it's important to know that there are other people like you out there, and there are people in your building and at your school that will support you and that love you.
Truly the feeling of being who you are and coming out, know that others will love you and will value you for that, and being able to just be all of the things that make you you, whether they are weird or funny or unusual or just incredible strengths. That being who you are is one of the most important things you can bring to the world.
There are a lot of people like you, whether you know it or not.
I went a long time thinking I would never find love and that I would be alone my whole life. And I was pleasantly surprised to find somebody to share my life with who loves me for who I am and who I can love for the same.
Life is so much better when you are being exactly who you are.
Happy Coming Out Day!
Happy Coming Out Day!
Happy Coming Out Day!
Feliz Día de Salida.
Happy Coming Out Day!
Happy Coming Out Day!